Yo, Philly. This is a four-part workshop on the 1950 census. This is the third part. We're going to find summary information from the housing schedule for any block of Philadelphia in 1950. And here are the four parts. This is actually going to be the shortest of the four parts of this workshop. So just to review, there was a housing schedule. The actual sheet is on the back of the population schedule. You're looking at a blank form. And on the first workshop part, I suggested strongly that you establish a resource folder and put stuff in it. And one of those things I want you to get was a high resolution copy of the housing schedule. I also want you to get a copy of the enumerator's handbook, and there's a link for that as well. That says urban and rural, but it also contains the instructions to the enumerators for the housing census. So that's kind of important. So we indicated that there are a number of people who are interested in the history of their houses, who lived in them in 1950, and location searches are ideal for this. So I gave the group two links, one from the Free Library of Philadelphia about how to trace one's house history, and the other from the City of Philadelphia about searching for property in the city. So we're going to first have to define in a greater detail what a census tract is and the relationship of that to block numbers, because those two things will define every single block in Philly. I'm going to use the example I started with, which is looking up the address of 1920 Morse Street in Philadelphia. And you can see in the upper left is the enumeration district microfilm scan, showing you that 51-1416, which is the enumeration district for the block that Morse is on, is in tract 32D. If you look to the upper right, you will see part of the enumeration district map. The 32D stands out quite easily. And then on the bottom right, you should be just able to make out Morse Street and block number 52. Block number 52. The definition of a census tract, and I got this from a library guide. The census tract is an area roughly equivalent to a neighborhood established by the Bureau of the Census for analyzing populations. They weren't interested in enumeration districts for analyzing populations. It's the census tract that the statistics are for. Census tracts generally encompass a population between 2,500 to 8,000 people. The Bureau of Census describes them as relatively permanent, but they do change over time. So if you had a bunch of census tracts from 1937 and compared it to 1950, you're going to have to do a certain amount of editing. It turns out that the Census Bureau, after the 1950 census was done and analyzed, published a series of pamphlets with maps and tables of summaries of housing statistics. They did this for all cities of 50,000 or more. If we look at Pennsylvania, we find out that these cities all have housing pamphlets, and of course Philadelphia is one of them. I threw in Camden, New Jersey, because that's right next door to Philadelphia. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to the U.S. Census Bureau website. I've given you the address of it in yellow. That's a shortened version of the longer address on the bottom. I want you to scroll down to Part 7, Philadelphia through Sacramento, and I want you to get and put in your folder, that resource folder I'm building for you, the pamphlets, those 3 parts of the pamphlet. Bring them into your computer and put them safely on your folder. If you do that, you will have block statistics for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There it is. Now, there are 64 individual maps, or at least parts of the broader map. The first 3 are index maps, and as you can see, there's a key map. There's a 1, 2, 3 area of Philadelphia, where 120 Morse is in area 2. Now, we found from the unified tool on the One-Step site, we found how to get the ED number, and from that to get the tract number, and then it would be easy to go to the ED map and find the block number. But you could do that all through the pamphlet. It's a little bit harder, but you could do that. You would say, oh, well, you know, Morse Street is in area 2, And we look closely at this, and we see that it's in 36. So it's in part 36. So you would have to figure out the street arrangements, etc., and then say, well, let's look at part 36. So here we are at part 36, or map 36, of 61 parts. And we want to go to the bottom of this page because that's where 32D is. And if you look to the bottom right of 32D, there is Morse block 52. And the tracts are separated by these thick, dark lines. To some extent, the tract maps are probably more accurate since they are done circa 1950 versus the enumeration district map, which I showed you is probably dated 1942, 1941, etc. Together, 32D 52 is the code to go to that particular block. That's the unique number for that block, 32D 52. Now, there's another part of this pamphlet that's going to show a table, and the table is going to show some summary characteristics of the block. I'll show you that table in a second. The table will have occupancy and tenure, who's renting, a number of people renting, number of people owning, condition and plumbing facilities, occupied numbers and non-white population, average monthly rent of the rentals, and the average value of the dwelling unit. That's all that's there from the housing schedule. I'm sure the housing schedule was destroyed, just like the population census was for 1950, and probably was not filmed. So we only have this, the summary material. So you look at the pamphlet, and as part of the pamphlet, there's going to be a table for every single block in Philly, every single block. And you can see the census tract numbers on the left, and the block number then is toward the right. So with this graphic you're looking at, I have reorganized the page so that 32D 52 is right underneath the headings for the columns. So let's try and read this. It's Census Tract 32D. It's block 52. There were 38 dwelling units that were on this block. 8 of them were owner-occupied, and renter-occupied is 28. Well, that adds up to 36, so I guess they missed 2 people. One of them was vacant, might have been for rent. Another one, other vacant and non-resident, not quite sure what that is. You probably would see that in the instructions for the enumerators. Then we look at the condition and plumbing facilities. They only reported 35 of the units. 6 of them had no private bath, or it was considered dilapidated, and the instructions of the enumerators with pictures are what is a dilapidated unit, what is not. One of them has no running water, but that could have been, the one up for rent where they stopped the water. I mean, that may not mean anything. If we look at the bottom, we have 38 units reporting, or at least 38 total number reporting of persons per room. I guess that 3 of them are considered overcrowded. And it looks like 35 of the 38 units were occupied by non-white population. Then we look at monthly rent, number reporting 26 people, so we're missing 2 there, and the average monthly rent was $26.80. Could that be right? The average monthly rent was $26.80, and the value of these dwellings, of one dwelling unit structure, the number reporting was 3, even though 8 had owner occupied. We'd have to see what that definition is, and the average value is $4,000. I was curious about that cost of living. That exactly what does that mean in terms of 2021? And so I thought it would be fun to try and spend $26.80 at Sunken Gardens on January 21st, 1950, which is in Philadelphia, and compare some of the items to today's prices. I chose this because I'm interested in menus when I do these talks, and I went online to an auction site, and they had a really neat menu from Sunken Gardens from January 21st, 1950. Really complete. So let me show you that. Well, first of all, presumably this was a very popular diner. It served dinners. Their motto was "Every meal a memory." And I think finally, the business stopped in the 1970s. This was mailed out to people because the upper right gives you an opportunity to put the person's address and send it to them. And you can see that there were some specials there for January 21st, 1950. And while you're waiting, you could have a dry martini for 35 cents. 35 cents. And there's some of their special dinners, $1.40, $1.25. They have a complete dinner for 85 cents. Look at all the choices you have. Choice of vegetables, choice of desserts, coffee or tea for 85 cents. If you went to Wawa, you probably, with a short sandwich, a soda, and chips, you probably wouldn't get out of that place for less than $8. And here you can have a complete dinner for 85 cents. Well, what do they have that I could spend some $26 on? And the answer is I don't think anything on that menu. And one thing about the menu was I was disappointed. There didn't appear to be any Philadelphia cuisine that is known for regional dishes. Kind of disappointed on that. But let's look at what they consider to be an expensive item. And that's a lobster shore dinner. It would cost you $2. You'd have an appetizer. You'd have 2 fresh vegetables, assorted rolls, dessert, and coffee. How much is that going to cost us today? So I went online and searched for the best seafood place in Philadelphia. And there's probably a lot of debate on that. And I picked this oyster house, looked at their menu. They have a comparable dish, and they do. They have a whole steam Maine lobster, corn slaw, drawn butter, no dessert, no drink, for $34. And they're on Sansom Street, which is kind of cute. So what did this exercise teach us? It taught us that things are a lot more expensive today, at least in terms of how much we pay for them. It taught us that, I guess we're getting hungry, and our dollar doesn't stretch maybe as great as it used to in that regard. So I hope you enjoyed that third part on block housing information. It should be helpful for those of you who want to know some socioeconomic information about the block that your residence you're searching is on. And I hope you're going through these in order. So good luck finding information, and we will turn our attention next to a much more detailed topic about how to use census tract information and addresses to find enumeration districts in 1950 Philly.